Everybody can be seated. Ready to go?
Thank you, Judge. Yes, appreciate the time. We're just talking about the things that Paul Caneiro said to police the morning of the fire, 27th. So obviously, these videos and these interactions, they're before police develop any sort of like suspicion with Paul Caneiro, right? You know, all these conversations are before they see him shutting off the DVR in the garage. They're all before we see any video of his car leaving. So these police officers and these detectives, they're just trying to figure out, like, if he knows anything about what started the fire. You know, we see cameras on your house, like, it might be nice to see what, you know, what we see on them, right? Because we know, and we'll probably talk about it, but you all got a sense of, there's two cameras by the driveway in the garage. There's one in the front and there's one in the back. So, I mean, any officer is going to find out, you know, do they show anything? So what happens when those conversations happen?
It's your house? Yes. Oh, where is all the DVD stuff and the cameras and everything in the house?
It's in the garage.
In the garage?
Yeah.
Where in the garage at?
Walk in the garage and it's all the way up top to the left.
Up top to the left? Do you have them running right now?
I've been having problems with stuff in the garage.
You've been having problems with stuff in the garage?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would take it over actually with one of the companies.
Okay. All right. Is the DVR for the cameras a white box?
I don't know.
You don't know? Okay.
I'm not trying to be cute here, ladies and gentlemen. But like, we are talking about Paul Caneiro. We are talking about a guy who is in the tech world. Like, it's what he does for a living, right? You heard from Dr. Gould, his neighbor, you know, that he helped him with the hard wiring of his cameras. You know, he's got all this stuff in his basement. He helped his brother put the servers in. He helps him with the generators and all kinds of stuff. But the police ask a simple question like, hey, where's your DVR? And all they get is, and then he looks to his daughter, Caitlin, who testified. I mean, really, should she be the one answering that question? Like, shouldn't he just say, hey, it's in the garage above the fridge over by right below the camera that's in there? Because there's a camera in there too, as we know. And the next response is sort of like, oh, I'm having trouble with stuff in the garage. And then he gets asked, is the DVR a white box? I don't remember. Like, these answers are just, they're really probative of his state of mind at the time. Yeah, he's a victim of a fire, so we think at this time. But like, he's just being asked simple questions. And it just seems like he's trying to do one of these. Like, let me back away from this DVR. I don't know anything about it. Could be on, could be off. I don't know. Just remember when they actually download it later, Detective Weisbrot told you that they looked back to see if there were any issues. So like, it's not like it wasn't investigated. They pulled the video, the DVR, and then they looked back. And you may recall, you may not, it's been a long trial. It ran continuously without interruption since October 15th, 2018. So like, there's no problem with these cameras. Those access points that he and Dr. Gould had, I mean, that's just kind of like tech guy problems. You know, it's like, my Verizon router's not good enough, so I got a bunch of access points. Like, if you look at that email, he's not saying my Wi-Fi doesn't work. We were talking about a Sense app. I think, and your recollection would control, but I think that ticket with the Wi-Fi or the Sense app I think is what controls the light in his house. So it's like, we're not really talking about the same thing. Like, why couldn't Paul Caneiro just say, hey, my DVR's in the garage, it's a white box or it's a black box? He shouldn't have to look to his daughter for that answer. I mean, She's not the one in charge of the cameras, obviously, but he can't answer the question. And I don't want to belabor it, but it's like really important that he's trying to get away from that DVR that he shut off 37 minutes or so before he left in the middle of the night. Because again, things like that, it's not like he told the police that, right? They want to argue now it's kind of innocuous, and we don't know who's driving, but if we didn't look, we wouldn't even have known his car left, because he didn't tell us. Cooperative, I mean, he's not a jerk, no doubt, but like, cooperative has a lot of meanings. And like, I'm not sure I agree with that. The memory, I mean, there are things in this case that you have to look at and you have to say to yourselves, why can't he just give us the answer, right? Keith is just saying, hey, Paul, give me the login, right? Give me the login. You don't know your login, Paul? It's like the same thing as not knowing what the color of your DVR is. I mean, maybe I don't, but he should, right? What he does for a living, he did everything in his house, and most of the things in his brother's house. Like, we're not talking about me and him being equals here. The passwords, I mean, when we think about what he can't tell Keith because he's not feeling well at 6:05 on November 19th, think about, like, why that's important. Because he's trying to hide it. Because then we listen to other evidence, right?
Don't say the name of the bank. I'll give you the info. It's the account name is AEGINA 99.
Okay.
Password is going to be either, it's going to be all lowercase, SQUARE, the number 1, 705, all numbers, all lowercase. If that doesn't work, try capital S at the beginning, and if that doesn't work, try exclamation capital S. Everything else the same, lowercase, and then the 4 numbers.
So he can't remember, he can't tell the police where his DVR is, or if he shut it off, or if it was not working properly, or if he didn't shut it off. And he couldn't give his brother the login to the TD Trust account because he didn't know it, he couldn't remember it, or because he didn't want him to get in there. I mean, obviously we see here, this is a phone call that he has December 5th with Tiffany Rivera, who ultimately is the office manager for Square One and EcoStar. So it's just interesting, just something to keep in the back of your mind when you evaluate the idea that looks can be deceiving. Cooperative, because they say he was cooperative, doesn't mean he was cooperative. He was trying to evade. We didn't know it yet because we didn't know the DVR was shut off yet, and we didn't know his car left in the middle of the night. They heard I was asleep, and they believed it, but they continued to investigate.
Mr. Decker, just 1 second. Can we send that down? Sorry, go ahead.
No, Judge, I'm sorry. When we talk about this, and we'll continue to get into it as we look at these phone calls between Keith and Paul, but we're looking at here the fact that he's spouting off his password to Tiffany Rivera because he wants Tiffany to get in there, into something that like he didn't want his brother to get into, because then we would have had the realization that we ultimately saw with the forging of the bank records and all the thefts. But think about, he can't give his brother the password on November 19th, 2018, about, what, 9 hours before he was murdered? He murdered his brother? But in 2018, Paul Caneiro logged into the TD Bank trust account 19 times. 19 times. He went into the trust account and said, I'm going to transfer it, not to Canada Life, but to myself. Like, there was a lot of discussion this morning about, like, this is a family business, and Keith takes money, and Paul takes money. Yeah, we did hear that. There is that. It's a family business, and they put a lot of stuff on credit cards and this and that. But that was not an invitation for the 10% owner to take money from the trust account. Because, interestingly, why would you kill your whole family? No one could ever do that. It's unimaginable, right? I get it. But like, when you hear the evidence that he's stealing from the trust account and the trust, you know, you probably heard most of the context of like, he's stealing from Keith, right? But he's not stealing from Keith. You know from the trust and from the attorney who came in and testified that when you create that irrevocable trust, you've given up control. Keith had no control. Make no mistake about it. All the things that Keith wanted to know, he wasn't even necessarily entitled to know. Like, by virtue of giving it to Paul, he gave him that access. But we heard about those duties, right? Fiduciary duties, duty of loyalty, you can't commingle. Yeah, you can get loans if you get permission from the beneficiaries, right? I mean, was there any testimony you ever asked Jennifer Caneiro, Sophia, or Jesse, like, hey, is it okay if I take a loan, I'll pay it back? Yes. That was a loose trust. But that doesn't mean that he could just go in there and take it. And there was conversations about paying the money back from April because he transferred it to himself. And then there was some testimony that he then took money from his account, put it back in the business, and it ended up in Greece or something. But really what happens when he's paying it back is it's going to the business, and then Keith is funding the trust again, and then Paul is supposed to send it to Canada Life. We heard expert testimony about the irrevocable trust, okay? Mr. Cardenas explained it, broke it down. We tried to keep it pretty relevant. But understand when we're talking about this trust, like, there's a lot you can do with the trust, right? You can invest it in real estate and take all that kind of stuff. But really what this was Paul had one job. And it was Keith funds the TD Bank trust account from his payroll. And Paul clicks transfer. That's all he had to do. But he couldn't resist the access to Keith's money. When we talk about special bonds, you heard testimony about special bonds. Really the only special bond you've heard about is Paul taking his brother's money as if it was his own. And they're still trying to justify it. Oh, he put money back in, and God knows when he put $160,000 in the business. Well, he owns 10%. I don't even know if that was the buy-in. No idea. But like, he put money in. Like Keith never put money in. You know, it's like when we go to the financials and they want to say he's got $50,000 disposable income. Well, they're not counting $160,000 spent on an Amex in 2017 or $140,000 on an Amex. They're not counting, they gave you $25,000 worth of car payments a year, which is probably accurate. But then when you combine the insurance, it's like $39,000. I mean, there are massive expenses here. When we just look at the chart that the ambassador testified to. Let's just look at the stuff that you weren't talking about. It wasn't talked about. Woodshire Apartments, that's rent, $2,673. Yardy Service, again, that's the same company that services the apartment in Ocean Township, $3,666. Restoration Hardware, $15,720. Tiffany & Co., $17,714. It's like when we heard the testimony about how like there were all the renovations going on in Paul's basement, right? We heard it just because it was in context of Lieutenant Catalona and the photos, but then some of the defense witnesses were talking about how, they were putting in custom cabinets, right? All the new lighting that you could control from your phone and all the kitchen and God knows what. It's like, stop spending, Paul. Stop spending. Like, you don't get to do all these things and then just take your brother's money. And Keith had enough. Like, yeah, Keith was emotionally cursed, right? He was pretty pissed off at Paul, we'll see it. But like, did he give Paul an invitation to take his money? Like, let's not talk like he wasn't in financial distress, okay? Could he have changed his ways and made it work financially? Sure. And it's almost like, are we criticizing Keith because he didn't have disability to fall back on? Like, does that make him a bad guy? Like, everybody should have disability and still be able to work at the family business? Like, because when we talk about later about, I'll stop saying later, it probably makes you nervous. But when we talk about Paul and all the things he stood to lose, Keith doesn't have that fallback, right? Paul has the disability, right? That's what they're arguing to. He's still got $200 and something thousand in disability coming to him. But like, that's not enough. It's not enough for him. He's losing out on all the income that he gets from Square One, right? And EcoStar. But the thing about Paul is, Ms. Wallace discussed it in her opening, is that like, he can't go get a job if Square One and EcoStar go away. Keith got an MBA from Columbia, right? He was planning, that's why he went back to school. Like, is Doris Duke, we'll talk about Doris Duke, is it going away, is it not going away? Like, there was just a lot of uncertainty. But Keith was preparing for it. He had job interviews, and he applied to Amazon, and Ben Paolucci, we heard about that. They had dinner that night, and they were saying that he didn't say anything bad about Paul, but there's only certain things that we can elicit from witnesses. That's actually admissible. So they had a conversation where it's true.
Yeah, I'm going to sustain that objection. Disregard that last sentence. Go ahead, Mr. Decker.
Sure. So Mr. Paolucci and Keith went to dinner Saturday night, which would have been the 17th of November. And before they went to dinner, they were actually at Ben Paolucci's house, and they were on the computer. Ben works for Amazon, right? And Keith was applying for jobs using Ben's like kind of referral program. And then they went to dinner, right? And what Mr. Paolucci was able to say was that I asked him not what the conversation was about, but what was the advice that you gave to Keith. And the advice that he gave to Keith was stop worrying about Paul and start worrying about yourself and your money and your family. So like, that's the context of Ben. And Ben texted Paul the morning of the fire, right? We know he did. He also texted Keith. And remember, Keith texted Paul too. We know all that. But it doesn't change the fact that he is trying to deceive his brother. Just obviously a picture of the garage here that we're looking at in Tilden Drive. I showed you the photo of the box that powers the DVR. The shed. I mean, there was a lot of testimony about this. There was a lot of discussion this morning. We see the white bucket over there. We know that that was put there by an officer who meant well, and he wanted to preserve a wet footprint, right? Thought he was doing the right thing. Ultimately, Lieutenant Catalona said he got there when he lifted it up and it dropped. Kind of did its job, not what he meant for it to do, but it did its job. Catalona says, though, so when he looks at that slate tile, it's not there anymore. But ultimately, Catalona, though, looks around and he finds this footprint, right? And they argue we didn't take any shoes or anything like that, which there were shoes in the basement in that pile. But Catalona looks at that, and then he actually consults with, I think he testified, Detective Flanagan, who's a little more knowledgeable with footprints. And they basically said that there was nothing pattern-wise that they were able to get from that shoe impression. So, you know, listen, if you believe the DNA, the ballistics, the cameras, and everything else in this case, that's Paul Caneiro's footprint. I mean, that's just the reality of it. He went to get the gas from the shed. He left it on the side of the garage. So I would submit to you, it's not like it's not there. It's just, they can argue that we don't know whose it is only because there's no way of knowing whose it is. I think it speaks for itself. There's really no other explanation than at 1:28, it says 2:28, but remember, it's off by an hour. Detective Weisbrot testified to that. Despite it running continuously since the middle of October without interruption, all of a sudden, this shuts off as Mr. Caneiro reaches up towards the camera and the system. Do I know if he pulled out an extension cord or if he hit the off button on the machine. No, I don't. Can't see it based upon the perspective. But it is very clear that he just shut the cameras off on the outside. So, one of the reasons I say that is because of his actions, there's a lot that you didn't get to see on the outside of the house. Like, it's hard to argue they don't know who this person was, or they don't know what was going on out here, when the only reason we don't know is because of him. So it's like kind of a little bit like interesting that you can cause the problem and then point the finger to someone else, like we should have done something better. Sorry, you shut the cameras off. We could never see what was showing on those cameras. But again, we talk about cooperative versus not uncooperative, but like, why is he telling the police certain things? Because remember, investigations, they progress. And police, they get a piece of information and they say we didn't investigate it. But they get a piece of information like, was he asleep? I don't know, let's figure it out. Ultimately, we know he's not asleep. Just like we knew he's in the basement, despite being told that, or telling the police that it was 4 p.m. and the last time he was there. So the police, we heard a lot about canvassing, and I already talked to you about the canvass on Tilden Drive, and there just weren't any cameras on the other side. I don't know what to tell you other than that. But as police are at 27 Tilden and they ask the Caneiros to go to the police department, ultimately, while they're there, and you heard testimony from the daughters, that they learn about something that's going on in Colts Neck. At 12:34, Paul and his family are at the police department, and Colts Neck Police receives 2 911 calls reporting a fire at 15 Willowbrook. The first caller, pretty simultaneous, but one of the callers was Catherine Lucchese. She lived right across the street, 44 Willowbrook. We had the surveillance from her house, and she calls 911.
911, where's the emergency?
Hi, my name is Paul Caneiro. There's a lot of smoke coming out of the house.
What's your address?
15 Willowbrook Road.
15 Willowbrook Road?
Yes.
And what town?
Post Neck, New Jersey.
And what's your name?
My name is Kathy.
Kathy, what phone number you calling from, Kathy?
Yeah, if somebody could send it right away.
What's the phone, Kathy, what's the phone number you're calling from? And you know if anyone's in the residence?
I'm calling my neighbor and they're not answering, and I don't think anybody's home.
Do you see any flames? Do you see any flames or is it smoke?
A lot of smoke. I can't see. There's a fire. It's on the outside of the house.
What address are you calling from?
I'm right across. I'm sorry. What street is that?
You're right across the street?
I live right across.
All right, we'll get somebody right out there, Kathy.
Okay, thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
You noted, you remember from her testimony that she had kids that shared a bus stop with Jesse and Sophia. So one of the first things she tells police that day on the 911 call, and also when the police arrived, is that Jesse and Sophia weren't at the bus stop. Now, I know kind of where we're at now. You've heard a lot of testimony, you've heard arguments from counsel, and it's kind of been like almost like, I think it's sort of presupposed now that like, we know when the fire starts, right? We know that, the power gets cut and then the telecom gets cut, but like it wasn't always that simple. It took investigation by detectives and all kinds of surveillance and different things to try to determine when this fire started. So when we look at it, in the perspective of like how the family was being treated at the police department and the like, this is being reported at 12:34 p.m. Like the police have no idea yet that this fire started earlier. It's going to take the generator. It's going to take getting some video. It's going to take, the 911 call from Mr. Capora. So when we think about the investigation, just recall that it takes a lot of effort to figure these things out, even if now we're all kind of conceding that the fire started at around, 3:42 or whatever, just shortly before that. And obviously, in addition to Ms. Lucchese, we had Dr. Boris Volstein, who lived next door, Ms. Mastalone talked about it. He also places 911 call once he shows up, and then he ultimately goes around and finds Keith's body.
Hello?
Hi, I didn't hear your
Hello.
name or what you're reporting, sir. What are you reporting?
Okay, fire.
Where?
Willowbrook Lane, Willowbrook Road.
What's the
Polk
address? Okay, what's the address?
I think it's 40, I don't know, I think it's 44 Willowbrook.
What's on fire?
The, Huh?
What is on fire?
the house.
Where do you see flames coming from?
I see the smoke from behind. I thought that's my neighbors from behind me. I opened the door, and there is a smoke's coming out, and there's a person laying down
Where are they laying down?
on
Can
the
you get over?
property
Can you get over
in
to
front
them?
of the house.
All right, get over
Yes,
to
I'm
them.
coming over.
Okay.
Oh,
Hit it prematurely. Well, you know what he says. He ultimately discovers, oh my God, there's a corpse. And they're like, what? And he's like, there's a body, it's dead. And he ultimately finds Keith Caneiro, who he knows he can't positively identify given the state he's in with the hood on. Now, police have a fire and they have a murder. They're ultimately going to start making other notifications to the prosecutor's office and different agencies. Fire's coming, but then we start to uncover the scene evidence and ultimately the electrical panel and the generator and the shell casings and some of the bullets. And it's like at this point, shortly thereafter, that police have this like coming to moment, right? Because we have a fire in the morning, and then other detectives get sent to a fire and a murder in another town, and then all of a sudden they realize, wow, like the guy who's killed in Colt's Neck is the brother of the guy who had the fire. And obviously it's kind of learned pretty quickly because detectives from my office were at both, so they communicate. But understand the context of like some of the testimony from Mr. Caneiro's daughters in the context of like what was going on and what police knew, because you know that it's not immediate that everybody said Paul Caneiro must have driven in the middle of the night. They didn't know yet. They didn't know the car left and the DVR and all that stuff. So they just have two incidents, and they're actually, I think the testimony is pretty clear. Like, you know, you got people who are victims of a fire, and then you got their family being shot, killed, stabbed, and like they don't know the connection yet. So they're taking precautions. And I'd submit that it was important that morning for the police to speak to the Caneiro family and to try to get information about what happened, because they were victims. They're still victims. They're victims of one of the counts in the indictment, and that you're going to have to decide. The aggravated arson at his own house. You know, they lived there. You know, you heard their testimony. They support their dad. Oh, okay, I get it. We all get it. Okay, but the family photos. I mean, that may have been then. That might have even been the day before. But like, everybody's got that breaking point, right? Nobody knows what's going to trigger. There's nothing that can trigger something like this, but something triggered it with Mr. Caneiro. I will never be able to tell you how he could kill his niece and his nephew. It certainly wasn't for $17,000 on a Tiffany card or something. Clearly. But that doesn't change with Mr. Caneiro. It doesn't change with Corey Caneiro. It doesn't change with God knows who else. That motive doesn't work for anyone. But you hear that testimony because it is relevant, because it just happened. Let's keep that in mind. Hours before this happens, hours before Mr. Caneiro's up in his bedroom, doesn't have any contact that night with either of his daughters and his wife. Sitting up in the bedroom with the gun, with the laser sight, with the laser light, like, kind of sitting there, probably stewing. Like, you know what, Keith? No more. Like, I'm not doing your freaking chores anymore. Like, yeah, I know I stole from you, but you know what? Deal with it. I'll pay you back when I feel like it. I mean, that seems to be the trigger, the reaction. There's no issue like that with Corey or anybody else. Like, that's not a coincidence. You know, you don't get yelled at by your brother at 6:05. You don't get accused of stealing by your brother at 6:05. You don't shut off your camera at 1:28. You don't then go down to your basement, shut off the rest of your cameras at 1:31. Your car doesn't just miraculously leave at 2:07. It doesn't just miraculously show up in Colts Neck and then miraculously come back at 4:08. It's not a coincidence. That's called evidence. I won't belabor this. You heard the testimony from Dr. Zhang and Dr. Toma. I'm not here to show you more pictures. I didn't do that because it's fun. I didn't want to make people react a certain way. You need to evaluate this evidence free from emotion. They've told you that. The judge will tell you that. I'll tell you that. You know, horrific. Horrific. But if you think he didn't do it, he didn't do it. I suggest that would be outrageous to believe, based upon the evidence in this case. But don't do it because of emotion. What happened is horrific. And she didn't deserve that, and he didn't deserve that. But I want to prove this case to you, as well as prove this case to you, beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm not sure what else we can give you by way of physical, tangible evidence. Anyone who gets backed into a corner by DNA, ballistics, cameras cutting off, the car leaving in the middle of the night, they can all go, he did it. Anybody can go, Corey did it. We ask you to be fair to both sides. I would suggest to you that when the evidence suggests that only one person could have done this, then the obligation as jurors would be to follow the evidence and the right verdict, which is ultimately going to be that, as unfathomable as it may be, he did this. So we know that the bodies are all pulled out. It's horrible. Obviously, that scene was terrible. I'm not sure I agree with the representations that it was such a bloody scene, right? There was blood everywhere. I mean, there was fire everywhere. We saw the blood in the kitchen, and Detective Cordoma testified about the bloodstain pattern analysis. And yeah, the swabs were taken, the bloodstain was done in 2018. The swabs were taken later. I don't even know if the testimony really said why. I don't really know. It doesn't really matter because they're just swabs of blood. If the DNA was degraded, you would have known it. You would have seen the numbers. They wouldn't have been able to, there wouldn't have been enough quality or quantity to come up with results. But they did. They're single source samples. Like, okay, they were taken later, but it doesn't change the fact that it's Sophia and Jesse's DNA. And it doesn't change the fact of what that means. Detective Cordoma, like, in his conclusion, he talks about how, you know, and we tie his testimony in with the DNA results, but when we look at the door frame going into the kitchen, Sophia's blood. We go around the island. There's a handprint and some blood. Jesse. Then you go continuing north, a little bit west, to the area where you saw the picture where Jesse was found in the kitchen on the ground. There's some blood there, and you would assume it's Jesse's, right? Because Jesse's found lying there. But when we found out is that swab that was taken from that area, it's actually a mixture. It's a mixture of Jesse and Sophia with like really high DNA results. They're in the PowerPoint. But like, then moving on a little bit east along the kitchen island, underneath the sink, there's another DNA sample taken, and that's Sophia. So like, in the context of like what's going on in Colts Neck, there's this like running around the kitchen. And what are we running for? What are we running from? And Sophia, you know where Carmelo Lamarca, the firefighter, you know where she was found up on the, going up to the second floor on the landing. She's there, her mom's a little bit below her by the basement stairs. Like, she's found there dead. But she was bleeding in the kitchen. Like, what was going on? You know, when we think about that in the context of like, where is Jennifer Caneiro's phone? I'm not sure I understand why that's so important. But you have to understand the context of like, what was Jennifer Caneiro doing? What was she responding to? Her husband had left the bed, right? He went to investigate why the power's out. Presumably, she woke up either when he left or like at some point she realizes the power's off and he's gone. Maybe she gets up to look for him, maybe not. Maybe she hears gunshots and then goes to get him. Like, is she worried about her phone? Is it maybe just in her bedroom still in the rubble with the Tiffany boxes? I mean, you saw that testimony. I mean, they don't dig out the master bedroom because it's not anywhere near the point of origin. Cordoma told you they dug out the basement in the area of the closet, right? They dig it out lowest, try to find lowest visible signs of fire. U patterns, V patterns, all that kind of stuff. But like, this wasn't a robbery, right? Are we trying to say it was a robbery? It wasn't a robbery. Think about it. The photo of Keith Caneiro when he's lying on his front lawn face down with his face in the dirt. His phone's sitting in his pocket. Or his wallet's sitting in his pocket. His phone's right next to him. Like, nobody took his phone. Nobody took his wallet. This isn't a robbery. No one took Jennifer Caneiro's phone. Could they have looked for it? For sure. For sure. If they look back now, they would have gone up to the master bedroom and they probably would have found it. Could they have gotten phone records? Sure. But you can't search something you don't have. So I don't understand exactly why that is, because think about the context of what was going on when she left her bedroom and what she found. She ultimately, obviously left the room, went downstairs, and at some point she encountered someone who shot her, stabbed her a few times, shot her, and then moved on to the kids. So like, the phone, really? You know, obviously it's important. Again, like I said, I think we've established a timeline. We've probably done a lot of talking about timelines. I got one too. I have no problem with their timeline, 0. But again, when we talk about investigation and like, did they do this? Did they not do this? Did they do this? There's a lot of work that goes into building that timeline. Like, it starts with, you know, Keith Caneiro dead, and then you find the casings, and then all of a sudden you find the meters ripped off, right? And then you talk to the firefighters. Anybody rip that off? No. Go to the generator. Anybody shut it off? No. It's like, what's going on? And then it takes time. Like the Wise cameras, you don't get that right away, right? You don't get that video of someone out there from 235 to 251 creeping outside the house. And they're talking about why it takes so long, 15 minutes, right? From 235 to 251, when again, the power shuts off miraculously. No coincidence. Are we seeing a pattern here? But they argue to you this morning that, like, if he's such a tech guy and he knows Keith's house so well, which he does, why did it take him so long? Well, I'd submit when he goes the way of the generator, and you'll see the video, all he's got to do with the generator is shut it off. I mean, he knows the generator. You know, Tyler Badaracco, the fire chief, who's also an electrician, said that this is not like where most people would turn off the generator. And he went and shut off the actual the master switch. But he was saying that that's not something that like many people even know is there and how to shut it off. But that doesn't take him long because Paul knows the generator. The way he knows everything in Keith's house. But the electrical panel's different. That's not really like an expertise. That's like brute force, right? You got to figure it out. You got to have something on you to rip that door off, right? And somehow you got to rip the tag off, and you got to rip. I don't even know exactly how it works, but it's not as quick as just flipping a switch. And you hear it. You hear it on the video when we watch that Wise camera from the garage. You can hear that like banging, you know, like before the camera goes off. All of a sudden you hear like throughout. I mean, the sound's not always perfect, but you can hear it. There's manipulation involved. It's not quick, you know. And he's also sitting out there, if you think about it, he's got to get the power off. But he's also then waiting. Like, I don't think he wanted to wait, let's say, 27 minutes for Keith to come outside, right? He didn't want that, because that's really what happened. He shut the power off at 2:51. He's got to wait for Keith, but he's not going in that house. You know, he's not going into that house until there's no men left in that house. That's the reality of that. Keith never saw those shots coming. But so, that electrical system and the Verizon information, it's all part of the process of figuring out the timeline. Because it's not like it's always been like, oh, it's a given that the fire started here. I mean, we saw the cross-examination as trial progressed, and I think even when we were talking about the timeline and, you know, the property, I think at some point the questions were even like, okay, there's the Macan at 228 or 428 or whatever it is, the second video. Like, all of a sudden now it's like, okay, it is the Macan. We just can't prove to you who's in it. And obviously you can't see inside the Macan, right? We know that. I mean, there's nothing I can do about this, nothing you can do about it, nothing anyone can do about it. It just is what it is. But is it a coincidence with all these other things, or is he really just driving the Porsche? But obviously we see the evidence relating to the generator. You've seen these pictures a million times. That's the generator. But these are just little pieces of information that they learn quickly in the investigation in Colts Neck. They can't go in the house right away, right? You know, they're still putting out the fire. Detective Cordoma and others told you that the scene's got to be made safe. They had to put the beams in downstairs and the supports in downstairs in the basement to make it safe. But as they do that, the detectives now are kind of focusing on, like, all right, we got these two incidents. Let's canvass in Colts Neck. Let's canvass in Ocean Township. And again, they didn't zone in on Paul Caneiro. This is just what the cameras show. Starting at 30 Tilton. See the blinking of lights up here? That's Mr. Caneiro's driveway. .207, which would be completely consistent, we watch later, with 19 Oxford, when you see Mr. Caneiro's car pulling out of his driveway. This is the second camera of 30 Tilton. This is the Porsche Macan driving in the direction of the stop sign at Green Grove Road. I'd also note that when you look at the taillights, and I know there was, remember there was some circling of taillights and things, because it wasn't always a given that that was Mr. Caneiro's car. Like, we got this, but maybe we didn't yet have the 19 Oxford, which shows it's his driveway and the car's leaving. But it also wouldn't have showed exactly which one. So we paid a lot of attention investigatively to the style of the taillights, and also used that to try to link it to some of the video that was in Colts Neck. This video is kind of, I would submit to you all that when police obtained this video, this is where the sirens went off. This is like the moment where it's like, he's not sleeping. I don't even remember if we knew he'd shut off the DVR yet, probably think we did. But then you get this, and it's like, I don't need to slow this down for you, just watch it for yourself. Obviously, that's the Porsche Macan that just left 27 Tilton Driveway at 2:07 a.m. heading north on Green Grove Road. We have the video, obviously, from 308 Green Grove. This is the other camera showing the front. But here we're going to see the stop sign. Start to see the tail lights that are pretty distinct. Again, it's just camera 2, which basically shows that 30 Tilton car goes past there, goes to 308 Green Grove, and now is heading in a northern direction. Bringing us to 85 Willowbrook, which was down the street from 15 Willowbrook. You know, here, it says on the camera, it's 2:23:53, and it says Paul arrives at Willowbrook, 2:27 a.m. So as you'll recall, there was some testimony from Detective Mahoney about the fact that the camera was about 3 minutes slow. Obviously, that's one of the videos where you have to do things like look at the tail lights and look at, you know, maybe slow it down. And I would submit to you that, you know, throughout the course of this trial has been conclusively established as being the Porsche Macan. Now, 44 Willowbrook, this is Miss Lucchese's house. She provided the cameras. She's the 911 caller, as we just talked about. Here's like that car slowing down at the end. Based upon my review of the video, obviously, it's something that you all need to make that determination. But it appears to me, because obviously there's a lot of testimony about where the car would have parked, that driveway that's to the west of the Caneiro property. And I think the one thing that we all agree on, that we've always believed that obviously Paul Caneiro didn't park in his brother's driveway when he went there at, 2:30 in the morning. There's no other place to park and try to avoid detection, potentially from anyone driving down the street. So I don't think there's any doubt with respect to where Mr. Caneiro parked his car. Obviously, might as well just touch it now because we're here. There was some cross-examination, first with Mahoney about that 867 Route 34. So that's the house, they talked about it this morning. It's the house behind Keith and Jennifer's house. And Mahoney was asked about it, and there were some questions about whether it was documented. But then when Petrozello testified, Lieutenant Petrozello said, it's actually 867 Route 34, but the address is Route 34, despite it being behind Keith's house. And Mahoney had previously said, I didn't get the cameras from there, but someone went there. I think someone got it. And then Petrozello came in, and instead of having like a gotcha moment, he explained, yeah, we got cameras from there. It's a Route 34 address. And ultimately, we looked at it, we didn't see anything. Counsel for Mr. Caneiro played a little small portion of it, and you can basically show what it doesn't show. And it's got, you can see the gate doesn't shoot very far down. But that's what the cameras show. Like, it's been talk about they didn't do this and they didn't try to get cameras here, but they asked about the cameras and it almost seemed like we were being accused of not getting them. And then Lieutenant Petrozello says, we looked at them and that's just what they show. So that's one of those things about the address of 15 Willowbrook, some of the arguments that are made about that driveway and what's over there. And there was that one picture I think they've shown in the past. It's like an overhead. Don't really need it, but it's an overhead of 15 Willowbrook. And they show that little driveway to the west for that 867 address. And they also show that little pathway on the front lawn, like right before the driveway. It's like a little cutout. And then, they were kind of suggesting with some witnesses, I think, that like car could have gone that way. And that's true, obviously. You're not going to park in the middle of like Willowbrook, leave the car running when you go and kill people. But one of the things that Petrozello said when he was asked about that is that, yeah, he was aware of that entrance, right? Or it's not really an entrance. It's like an opening between trees on the front lawn. And he said, one of the reasons I'm aware of it is because we used it. Like law enforcement actually used that to drive vehicles on the lawn during the course of like fire suppression and the coming days while they're investigating the scene for 5 days or so at Willowbrook. But in that regard, we'll talk about it probably again, but it's a large property, right? You saw Willowbrook, it's a big house. I mean, it's a big house, and it's a big piece of property. But when you look at that overhead map, and maybe I'll pull it up at some point, think about getting out of the basement, going up the stairs, going out the side door where the door's open, right? He leaves that door open, probably to lend some air to the fire, I would gather. This is one of the reasons, sort of like he said at 27 Tilden, like when they closed the garage door and opened it, he was like, I was afraid that air was gonna do something. He made some comment like that. But when you leave, you start the fire, and you cut the line, you start the fire, and then you gotta get out of there. You talked about how you gotta get out of there quick, right? That property is not that big. I mean, like, we could estimate it, but it wasn't measured by detective vote or anything, but, you know, maybe it's like from here to wherever you guys go downstairs, at the end of the day, in a straight line. It's not that far. There's no way that someone who just murdered 4 people can't get out of that basement, run across the lawn, jump in a car, and then be on this camera at that time. Like, it's not really a gotcha. It just completely makes sense. It's kind of like the argument about, well, you know, Zerillo and Petrozello told you that they had to go to Pennsylvania to talk to Corey Caneiro, right? Because he didn't drive at night. That was the testimony. They drove to Pennsylvania. They met with him. Then they argue that, like, oh, he can't drive at night, but hey, the morning of the fire at Paul's house, he could drive over to 27 Tilden 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever, in the dark. As if they're the same thing. As if driving from Pennsylvania at, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night is the same thing as driving from Fairhaven to Ocean Township to help your brother. He bought him money. He took them out for bagels. That's all you have. So it's like, oh, he can't drive at night, right? He asked him to come over. That's what you have. So let's just keep that in mind when we're trying to tarnish something that has no evidence. Now we're at six minutes after that ONT line is cut. He runs across the property, jumps in his car. And remember, this camera's right there. Like, the driveway that we're talking about would be like right over here. So it's not like he's, and if you remember from Miss Lucchese's cameras, when you looked at him during the day, remember she was over here, and she's on the phone, she's calling 911, and you could see she's got the round driveway. And like, you could see directly across to 15 Willowbrook, the property. So all you're doing is going here, getting in your car, and then going here. So that timeline is not anything other than completely consistent with getting the hell out of there. We got the Porsche Macan at 348, heading back to Ocean Township to run 308 Green Grove. It's going to turn left onto Tilton Drive. Now again, we see, this is the camera again that we talked about before. This is like the conclusive shot that this is Paul Caneiro's car. Car passes 308 Tilden, or 308 Green Grove heading toward Tilden. Now it's on the 2 cameras from 30 Tilden. And we're gonna look up in this area. Once the car passes, we're gonna see the area of the driveway at 22nd Tilton. Just about 408, or just after 408, Mr. Caneiro's car has passed 30 Tilton, and now he's pulled into his driveway, which is ultimately going to be corroborated by the 19 Oxford cameras. Now, this is just a visual comparison you saw during trial. This was just Mr. Caneiro's car leaving, 20750, and this is a picture of the car at the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office facility later, showing that that's Mr. Caneiro's car. 408, returning, same photo. And we talked about the lights. Part of what the investigation determined real quick, that the loaner, the Porsche Macan, which is part one over here, had a taillight out, okay? So the light over here, when you watch on the video, there's a light over here that's on. This one's out. So you see on this side, there's a light here and a light on the side. And then we have these kind of long, elongated lights that you can see distinctively on those videos. So again, this is something that needed work to be figured out. Now, again, in the context of investigation and what we learned and when, and why he would need to flee the area so quickly, once the investigation started in Colts Neck and they get the generator and they get the casings and they get, they begin the origin and cause. But shortly before that, while they really can't do anything that day, Detective Zerillo, if you'll recall, he runs like the call sheets from the night before, just because I guess he usually does that in the morning. And now all of a sudden they have this incident. And ultimately he uncovers a phone call in the middle of the night reporting shots fired. And that's where ultimately police are able to track down the 911 call from Mr. Kapoor. And that obviously was something that was very interesting because, you heard the testimony from Detective Cordoma about the slow burning fire. But again, that's not necessarily something conclusively that's that easy to establish unless you have other information uncovered by the investigation like the ONT line and the generator. So the timing of that, it's going to become the question of is there a coincidence between the timing of electricity loss, shots fired, and then ultimately, the fire itself. So that's where we get to the 911 call from Mr. Kapoor.
Colts Neck Police, Operator Ward.
Hey, how are you?
Hi.
Question, do you know hunting in the middle of the night in Post Neck or not?
No, you're not allowed to hunt anywhere in the middle of the night. Are you hearing gunshots?
I heard gunshots, yeah.
Okay, where are you? Let me send somebody to the area.
Falling from River's Edge.
Okay, you don't see anything, you just hear it?
I was in bed and clearly I heard bump, 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 and then one boom. It just clearly a gunshot.
Okay, absolutely. We'll send somebody right over to the area. You said you can't see a car or anything that would be involved or anything like that, right? It's pretty dark.
Yeah, I didn't see anything.
Okay. What street are you on, just so we can get a reference point?
River's Edge.
You're on River's Edge.
I live in River's Edge and Falling. So probably right away after. Just when you see right.
And how many of them did you hear?
It was five.
Five.
And then 2 secondary and 1 more.
Okay, let me send somebody to where you're out there. Can I just get your name for my record?
Dennis February.
And what's your telephone number, Dennis? Just for my record, we're not going to call you.
That's okay, you can if you wanted to.
Okay, and you don't want to speak to an officer, you just wanted the area checked, right?
Yeah, I don't care. I think it would be, if it he was hunting and he took out a deer. Still pretty far with this guy's range. I just don't have anyone else getting shot.
Yeah, let me just double check and make sure. No, I don't think if it was an officer putting down a deer, it would go off that much. And I don't see them doing anything right now. Yeah, so it's not an officer putting a deer down. All right, we'll send somebody right out. Thanks so much for reporting it, Dennis. Have a good morning.
So obviously that's something that's uncovered, which leads kind of to the realization of, like, initially, fire doesn't start at 12:34, right? It's just when it's discovered. It actually occurs, the murders and the fires actually occur hours earlier than that. It's just, for whatever reason, that fire just didn't catch very quickly. And ultimately, the introduction of oxygen by first responders and firefighters ultimately had that fire go from X to Y very quickly. We talked about the cameras, obviously, a lot. We talked about how they nitpicked Marino and how he unplugged this and unplugged that. But obviously now we're looking at a situation where, just from the perspective of, we got shots fired at 3:26. We got a fire call at 12:34, right? And we got murders. Now we're looking back as the investigation is beginning, and it's like, we got all these, we got his car leaving and coming, and now it's starting to make sense as to, like, why is this guy shutting off his camera at 2:08 when we have a shots fired call at 3:26, 3:30? Starting to make it look like there's not just an issue with his camera. It's starting to look purposeful. It's a buildup, and it's the police following the evidence, the surveillance. We're not at ballistics yet, we're not at DNA, but they're following the evidence, and it's like, shut off the camera, leave in the middle of the night, shots fired, car comes back, fire at my house, oh, and yeah, shut off my cameras, so you can't see anything. That's before, ladies and gentlemen, that's all before DNA. That's all before ballistics. That's all before figuring out that the guy's up in his room practicing. Because when you look at it in the context of the defense, that the arguments that being made today, obviously, we listen to Mass Stallone. Obviously, we respect defense counsel. We've all worked well together during the course of trial. But when you look at what they're trying to argue to you, it's really that Paul Caneiro, for you to find anything other than he killed everybody, he would have to be the unluckiest man in the world, because he would have to shut off his cameras, get framed, but then not be able to prove you got framed because you shut off your cameras. Like, it's really kind of hard to sink your teeth into that. Talked about the cadaver dog, and now we just talk about from the perspective of, by shutting off the cameras, the 4 cameras outside, the one above the DVR in the garage, and then the 2 Wi-Fi. What you, ladies and gentlemen, and what we, as the investigative team and the state of New Jersey, missed because of what he did at 1:28 and 1:31 in the morning is, we missed who took the gun out of his padlocked gun locker in the basement, right? All the guns are kept there, they're locked up, right? I don't know how anyone's getting in there with that lock on there. You saw the lock in the pictures. Who got in the Macan? Who backed out of the driveway? Who then came back after the murder spree, downstairs, right, where all the guns are kept, swap the barrel, take the barrel out, put the old barrel back in, lock it back up in your locker, right? Who transferred that go bag into the Porsche Macan? Like, remember, when you watch the camera, the DVR in the garage, when he shuts it off, it's staring at the Macan, right? So that's just another thing that, like, when he popped the rear of the Cayenne and put the bag in it, we would have seen that. But because of what he did, we can't. But I don't know if seeing it would be better than the fact that he just shut off his cameras so you wouldn't see it. I mean, we could probably debate which one would be more important or more probative of his guilt and all the hindering efforts. Who buried the bloody clothes in the corner of the basement? You know, again, we've been criticized about like transfer and all this stuff, but like, you would have saw it if you didn't shut off the camera. You would have seen it. Who went outside, set the fire? Who tried to torch the Macan in the driveway? That flash of fire. The one camera is staring at the Porsche Macan. He shuts off the camera because he's about to do these things. Because here's what we're looking at, the Porsche Cayenne. With the backpack, right? We got the barrel. We got the knife. We got the FLIR. He's got multiple spare phones. I could show them to you. We need to. I'm not saying he used spare phones to plug the FLIR into so he could see better. I'm not saying I don't know. I don't know if he did or not. But he had it. And it's like, why is all this stuff in the bag? Why is it in the bag? Why, if he's being set up, how the hell did Corey get his passport, his driver's license? He's got every one of his daughter's savings bonds. You know, like Mrs. Gould, I believe it was, and also Paul Caneiro testified about the bag, right? How it was like an extension of his wallet. He always had it with him. And Miss Gould said it was always in, I think she said, the car. Now, do we think if that's even true? I don't mean to be demeaning, but if we think that that bag is really an extension and he always had it on him and he never went anywhere without it, do we think it was always in his wife's car, or do we think it was always in his car? I mean, if he's got that backpack with him a lot of the time, it's probably going to be in his car. Now all of a sudden, you know, the neighbors come in and saying, oh, he always had the backpack. And the daughter says, he's always got the backpack. It's like, you know, Caneiro's versus the world. And all these different things that the people came in and said that just seem to be convenient with some of the state's proofs. But again, his backpack, what is he doing with all this stuff? The bag's found on November 20th. The bag's in the car that got pulled out at 5 o'clock in the morning. Like, if he was really sleeping and he woke up and he's a victim of a fire, how the hell did he pack a bag? Because he had to have just done it because the barrel's in it. So, like, we know that there was time between 4:08 and when the fire's discovered. And the fact that he's waking everybody up, shoeless, look at me, I didn't have time to put shoes on, kind of thing. It's just perpetuating a fraud. And there's no way that that whole thing was set up. Again, the other camera that we would have seen, the storage locker. I don't mean to belabor it, but like, it's not so much that he shut the cameras off, it's what they showed, or what they would have shown had he not shut them off. That's where he keeps all his guns. That's where the gun is. This is where the murder weapon is, right here. The other one with the laser sights is up in his bedroom, but this is the murder weapon in here. It's a locked storage locker. How is Corey getting in there? How's he getting in there? How's he opening it? How's he opening it again to put it back? You know, why would Paul shut off the camera showing Corey putting the gun away? Because it didn't happen. It didn't happen. It's the ammunition. This is the Fiocchi. We didn't bring all of it in. We have, you know, a sampling of it. But again, when we just looked at what the other camera showed by the workbench where all the guns was, where we would have seen the locker and putting it away. Now we're looking at this area over here. We're looking at the area, the window well is right here. We see a dresser, we saw a bunch of pictures. But this is the way it looked at 1:31 a.m. This is what that, like, the soup of articles Ms. Massalone called it this morning. It didn't start that way, right? This is it. It's not until he comes home and sticks all that stuff under there and then sets the fire right here. You can even do the right angle. Fire set right here. So tempting to destroy this. But we can't see, because the camera shut off, all the jeans and the scarf and all that evidence that's tucked underneath there. So, you know, is it a mess? Is it burnt? Is it, you know, wet? Yeah, it is. But were you able to get DNA results for Sophia Caneiro? RMPs also, like huge random match probabilities and large likelihood ratios. It didn't affect Sophia's DNA. I mean, they want to get away from Paul's DNA, even though there's a bunch of results there. But like, okay, like we'll talk about how those are reliable. Dr. Reich, you know, how many samples did he agree with me and say, yeah, that's a reliable result. Yeah, that's a reliable result. But I don't know why they're not worried about Sophia Caneiro's DNA being on the jeans, right? In the basement. Like, I mean, again, before we found out financial stuff, you know, we already knew the cars, and we didn't know the DVR, but then all of a sudden, end of, I think it was November like 28th, 29th, 2018, like, we start to get some DNA results. And like, what do you do, ladies and gentlemen? What are you gonna do if the jeans with your DNA inside, so like, I don't care what size they are, he wore them. Okay, that's clear. He wore these jeans. They have his niece's blood all over them, and Jesse's. And it's not just Star Mix, it's not just Bodie, because there's testimony that state police used, you know, traditional binary DNA to get Jesse Caneiro's DNA right here. So, you want to talk about the evolution of like, it was my brother because they didn't get his DNA, or, you know, oh, the Wi-Fi wasn't working, my camera didn't show up. I mean, what else are you going to do? There was some cross-examination and there was some discussion today about, let's have the lights today, about, we heard on cross-examination that there was 2 pairs of jeans. You're going to have pictures too. This is S231C. This is, I would submit to you, and you're going to have it. I'm not asking you to believe me. This is your job to determine whether or not there's any degree of believing that these in the same pile aren't just a portion of what's missing from these jeans. I mean, maybe there's no way to conclusively tell. I don't really see any difference in coloring. I think we were looking at photos before, and in photos maybe there's interesting colors. But to me, you're missing a label here. You're missing a label here, partially burned off. You can see actually like the top portion of what's there appears to be missing. And then you got the label right here. I mean, first of all, if there was 2 pairs of pants, first of all, what's the difference? There's also a t-shirt, a long sleeve shirt, like there's other shirts. But second of all, it just seems like a grasp, like, wow, we found the smoking gun. There's actually 2 pairs of jeans. There's one. And you can obviously, ladies and gentlemen, anything I say is in evidence, okay? I'm not asking you to just believe me because I'm me, okay? I'm trying my best to explain to you what I think and Miss Wallace thinks about what the evidence shows. And I suspect that that is an attempt to try to create a second person is involved theory. But again, we won't know if there was 1 pair thrown into that pile or 2 because he shut that camera off at 1:31. This again is just the area. You've seen the photos. You saw what it looked like to begin with, and you saw what it looks like now in this photo, S1A110. And ultimately, that pile has been significantly reduced given the effects of the fire. You know, we traced that hose from the outside. Now you can see it from the inside, exactly where that point of origin is. I keep pointing over there, but you're all looking over here. I'll get the hang of it. This is the basement window right here, so we're looking right outside, okay? Fire, pile of charred articles. Just another angle, so we see that dresser over here. This is the area, and this is the point of origin of the fire, just basically within or just outside the window. Again, just another photo of what we're looking at. Why are there so many gloves? I didn't realize there were so many gloves. There's a lot of gloves in the basement. They did have a bunch. Paul had a lot of gloves, not black nitrile gloves, on the workbench near where all his guns were. You know, he cleaned guns. I mean, I get it. It's no problem. I don't know why there's so many here, or at least it's being alleged there's so many gloves. I mean, he probably put multiple gloves on, right? And he probably took them off the same way I would. That's why there's testimony with the DNA. It's like, we really don't know what's inside, what's outside, because, you know, this would be the outside if it came like this, but it could actually be the inside. There's a bunch of gloves because he's trying to not get blood all over him, right? He's trying not to leave fingerprints on anything in Keith's house. He's probably using multiple gloves, and ultimately, I think you'll find that he's using that scarf wrapped around the knife, stabbing Sophia, because we know from the DNA, and we knew this early on, that Sophia's blood is on the handle of this knife. You've seen the knife. I'm not going to belabor it. Wraps the scarf around his hand with the nitrile glove. And that's why that facial injury, slamming into her face, pierced her brain. God help me. That's why they got DNA off the handle of the knife belonging to Sophia Caneiro. Again, just showing you what you would have seen. That's the camera up there. And we got the Porsche Macan with the fire damage right here. And obviously we know he shut off his cameras, and obviously we know that Dr. Gould is his neighbor behind him, and police were able to get camera footage from 19 Oxford. We start with, again, you've seen it. I don't want to belabor this stuff, ladies and gentlemen, but I have the burden in this case to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Caneiro committed these crimes. And if I left anything out, or if I went too fast, or if I rushed through it, I wouldn't be doing my job. So I appreciate your patience in this regard, but obviously we're looking at 206-14. And again, we didn't know Paul Caneiro left in the middle of the night because he didn't tell us, right? So police have to get the footage and then ultimately have to make the observations that they make. It's all good. Can't skip ahead. Blue 719, obviously we're watching the car backing up, K-turning, and approaching the end of the driveway in Tilton. And then it's going to head towards 30 Tilton, 308 Green Grove, right onto Green Grove. But again, obviously it's not something that we get immediately. So now, 408-17, we're going to try to confirm the rest of the cameras, and we're going to see Mr. Caneiro driving his vehicle into his driveway at 408. So after a 2-hour absence from the driveway, in the middle of the night, Mr. Caneiro's back at about 4:09.
Mr. Decker, I'm going to stop you for a second. Can we move that stuff? Can I just ask the jury to go in the jury room for a minute? Please don't discuss this case or do any research.